"Oh, she's just the wife," the mistress whispered with a cruel smile, flaunting the ring like a trophy. He said she wouldn't even notice. But Kaylee noticed everything. The brand name etched into the box. The press release scheduled for Monday. The stock price she could move with one statement. She didn't scream, didn't make a scene. Because when a woman like Kaylee is silent, it's not surrender, it's setup. By the time the world learned who truly owned the jewelry empire behind that ring, the mistress would realize she'd never been wearing love, only leverage. Stay with us. Because what begins as betrayal ends as a masterclass in control. The boutique shimmered with wealth, every surface polished until it glowed beneath the warm light of chandeliers. Glass cases stretched wall to wall, cradling diamonds that caught the eye and refused to let go. Each stone perched on velvet as if it were a monarch in exile. In the center of it all stood Austin Reed, his posture carved with confidence, his tailored suit cut to perfection, the gold of his cufflinks catching every flicker of light. He moved with the ease of a man accustomed to indulgence, the kind of presence that made attendants bow their heads before he even spoke. With a quiet snap, the salesman set a velvet box on the counter. Austin didn't hesitate. He opened it with a flourish, revealing a diamond ring so luminous it seemed to command the room. Oval cut, haloed with smaller stones, it flared with fire under the glass, daring anyone to look away. Austin's mouth curved into the faintest smirk, as though the brilliance of the gem was simply an extension of his own power. The recipient, Serena Vale, leaned closer, her glossy lips parting in admiration. Platinum blonde hair cascaded over her bare shoulders, her dress an unapologetic crimson that hugged her figure and demanded attention. Serena was infamous in Atlanta's social pages. Her parties ended in scandal, her name whispered more often in gossip than in praise. Yet here she stood, basking in the glow of a man willing to buy her not just affection, but spectacle. She slipped her manicured hand forward, the diamond catching on her skin as though it had been waiting for her. The staff exchanged glances, but no one spoke. Their silence was its own language. They knew Austin Reed was married, knew his wife's name carried weight far heavier than Serena's beauty ever could, and yet none of that mattered now. What mattered was the performance, the mistress adorned in a ring meant to crown queens, the businessman who wore betrayal like a tailored accessory. Serena lifted her hand higher, admiring the way the jewel fractured the boutique's light into bursts of flame. She laughed softly, a sound rehearsed to suggest innocence when everyone knew it was anything but. "It's exquisite," she purred, her voice dripping with possession. Austin leaned in, brushing her cheek with the faintest kiss, and the gesture sealed more than the sale. It announced a secret dressed in diamonds, designed to be discovered. By the time they left, whispers already trailed them like perfume in the air. A billionaire's wife somewhere in the city remained unaware, but the streets of Atlanta knew. Austin Reed had just bought his mistress a ring, and with it, he had bought himself a scandal waiting to ignite. Morning light streamed through the high windows of Eliora's headquarters, pouring across polished oak tables and scattering against crystal carafes filled with water and citrus. The boardroom gleamed with restrained elegance, every detail a reflection of the woman who presided over it. Kaylee Reed sat at the head of the table, a vision of composure in a slate-gray sheath dress that hugged her frame without announcing itself. At 32, her authority was not demanded but assumed, woven into the measured cadence of her voice, the decisive tilt of her chin. Her skin, rich and luminous against the daylight, carried the quiet glow of someone who moved through the world without apology. Her natural coils framed her face, softening the sharp lines of cheekbones that had intimidated more than one competitor across this very table. Yet when she smiled, briefly, almost imperceptibly, the room seemed to ease, as if the air itself recognized her grace. She was not the kind of leader who needed to raise her voice. The stillness she carried was command enough. On the walls hung sketches of upcoming collections, raw visions of beauty captured in pencil before becoming reality in Eliora's workshops. Kaylee's gaze moved across them, recalling every decision that had led the company here. The rare stones she had sourced personally, the artisans she had flown to Paris to meet, the negotiations she had won without theatrics. Unlike Austin, her husband, who thrived in headlines and grand gestures, Kaylee built her empire in silence, her victory stitched into the fabric of a brand known across continents. She reached for her notes, scanning through financial updates and proposals for expansion in Dubai. Each number told a story she understood instinctively. Eleora was thriving because she understood more than jewelry. She understood desire, legacy, the way a single piece could crown a woman's presence or betray the weakness of a man. What she didn't know, not yet, was that one of her creations had already left her control, sparkling not on a runway or in the hands of royalty, but on the finger of a mistress flaunting it for attention. Around her, board members murmured, waiting for her cue. With a quiet nod, she set the agenda into motion, her voice calm, deliberate, assured. This was her world, the one she had carved without needing Austin's wealth or his name. She commanded Eleora with the precision of a jeweler and the vision of a queen. But even here, in the safety of polished glass and order, the storm was already building. Beyond these walls, a ring she had designed glowed on another woman's hand, and soon the whispers would find their way to her. The gala shimmered with extravagance, a sea of gowns and tuxedos moving beneath chandeliers that dripped with crystal like frozen rain. The air carried the faint perfume of roses and champagne, a carefully curated elegance designed to impress. But no matter how dazzling the setting, it was Serena Vale who claimed the spotlight. She swept into the room on Austin Reed's arm, her laughter loud enough to draw eyes before the sparkle of her jewels did the rest. The crimson silk of her dress clung to her with calculated precision, but it was the ring that silenced the air around her. The diamond flared beneath the lights, catching flashes from cameras as though it were alive, demanding to be seen. Serena lifted her hand often, fingers grazing her glass, gesturing as she spoke, every movement crafted to show the oval stone haloed in fire. Whispers spread like ripples in still water, first curious, then sharp with judgment. Everyone knew Austin was married. Everyone knew the woman on his arm was not his wife. But the audacity of the ring, the size, the cut, the unmistakable craftsmanship made it more than gossip. It was spectacle. Austin reveled in it, his smile self-satisfied, his hand grazing the small of Serena's back as though she were his greatest acquisition. He didn't flinch under the glances, didn't falter when cameras caught them head-on. To him, scandal was not shame, but currency, and tonight he was spending freely. Then the room shifted. The doors opened once more, and Kaylee Reed entered. She moved without haste, yet the crowd seemed to part instinctively, conversations faltering, eyes darting toward her as if gravity itself had changed. Her gown, deep emerald silk that flowed to the floor, caught the light with every measured step. The shade sharpened the fire already burning in her eyes, though her face remained serene, untouched by the chaos already unraveling. There was a pause, as if the entire room held its breath. For while Serena sought attention, Kaylee commanded it without trying. The two women could not have been more different, one dripping in borrowed arrogance, the other wrapped in quiet authority. But it was not the contrast of their presence that froze the air. It was the ring. Kaylee's gaze swept the hall, casual yet precise, until it landed on Serena's hand. The diamond glared back at her like a mirror. Recognition struck instantly. She knew its cut, its fire, the hours poured into its creation. She had approved the design herself, kept it locked away in Eleora's private suite, destined for an unveiling in Paris. Yet here it gleamed on the hand of her husband's mistress, exposed under the harsh flash of cameras. Kaylee did not falter. She lifted her glass, the stem steady between her fingers, and stepped further into the room. If the world wanted a spectacle, they were about to witness a different kind of performance. Kaylee's eyes locked on the stone, its fire throwing shards of light into the air as if taunting her. Every detail called to memory. The delicate halo setting, the subtle curvature of the band, the rare diamond she had sourced personally from a mine in Botswana. It was more than a ring. It was a symbol of her vision, of Eleora's excellence, and it was never meant to be here, flaunted like a trophy on Serena Vale's hand. For a fleeting second, Something hot pressed against her composure. Humiliation, betrayal, the sharp sting of realizing her husband had plucked from her private vault what was meant for the world stage. But Kaylee refused to grant it power. Her lips curved into a serene smile, the kind that revealed nothing but concealed everything. She raised her glass, the gesture poised and deliberate, and wove her way through the glittering crowd. Heads turned as she passed, murmurs trailing her like a shadow. She could feel the eyes that darted from her emerald gown to Serena's crimson figure, to the blazing diamond that now existed between them like a spark waiting for air. Serena laughed at something Austin whispered, her hand rising once more so the cameras could capture the jewel. But as her gaze swept lazily across the room, it collided with Kaylee's. For a moment, Serena's smirk faltered. The confidence in her posture flickered, just slightly, as though she had glimpsed something she hadn't prepared for. Austin, oblivious or willfully blind, continued smiling, basking in his own audacity. Kaylee closed the distance slowly, never rushing, her movements so graceful they drew attention without demanding it. She stopped within arm's reach of Serena, her expression the picture of courtesy. "What a beautiful evening," Kaylee said, her tone smooth, silken, and edged with steel. Her gaze dipped to the ring for a single heartbeat, then rose again, meeting Serena's eyes without wavering. "It's always interesting to see where my designs end up." The words slipped between them like a knife dressed in velvet. Serena blinked, confusion crossing her face before realization began to dawn. The weight of the diamond on her finger suddenly felt heavier, less like an adornment and more like a mark. Across the room, the whispers intensified, rippling outward in waves. Kaylee's calm smile never faltered as she lifted her glass in the faintest gesture of acknowledgement, then turned her head toward the cameras already capturing the moment. What could have been humiliation had transformed into something else entirely, an unspoken declaration that the story was not Serena's to tell, nor Austin's to control. It was hers, and she had just taken it back. The chandeliers above scattered their light across polished marble, the glow catching on every sequin, every glass of champagne, every whispered glance. Around them, the hum of conversation thinned, curiosity sharpening into silence as Serena Vale and Kaylee Reed stood face to face. Serena's scarlet smile wavered, though her hand remained lifted, the diamond blazing under the scrutiny of too many eyes. Her laugh, practiced and lilting, faltered as Kaylee's words sank in like a note of music she hadn't expected to hear. Austin shifted beside her, his smug posture unraveling as awareness crept into his expression. He had built the scene for spectacle, a mistress adorned and flaunted as though the world itself were his audience. But now he saw the cameras pivot, the attention recalibrate, and the lines of control slip from his grasp. Serena recovered quickly, or tried to. "Well," she purred, lowering her voice so only Kaylee could hear, "it seems even the most talented designers should be flattered when their work is chosen by the right people." She raised her chin, daring Kaylee to bristle. But Kaylee only smiled, serene and unshaken, as though she were speaking not to a rival, but to a child caught playing with her crown jewels. "The right people?" Kaylee echoed softly, her eyes unwavering. "Funny, I don't remember offering that piece for sale." The sentence, delivered with velvet precision, cut deeper than volume ever could. Serena's painted lips parted, but no words came. For a fraction of a second, her confidence cracked, her gaze flickering toward Austin as if he might steady her. Instead, his jaw tightened, his hand falling from the small of her back. The crowd around them leaned closer, the air heavy with anticipation. A few cameras flashed, capturing Serena's stumble, Kaylee's poised defiance, the diamond between them now gleaming less like a prize and more like evidence. Kaylee did not press further. She didn't need to. She let the silence linger, let Serena's faltering composure fill it, let Austin stew in the consequences of his carelessness. Then, with deliberate grace, she lifted her glass and touched it lightly to Serena's. The crystal chimed, delicate and final. "To exquisite craftsmanship," Kaylee said, her tone carrying across the hush of the room. Serena forced a laugh, but it rang hollow, brittle as glass. Around them, whispers surged again, no longer admiration but speculation, every murmur weaving into a narrative Kaylee controlled simply by standing her ground. And in that instant, under the chandeliers and the unblinking eyes of the world, it was no longer Serena's ring or Austin's gesture. It was Kaylee's story, and she had just begun to tell it. The door slammed behind him, the echo reverberating through the marble and glass of the penthouse like a warning shot. Austin Reed's tie hung loose around his neck, his face flushed with anger, his movements sharp as if fury itself propelled him across the room. He paced like a man whose kingdom had just been threatened, his voice rising before Kaylee even turned her head. "Do you have any idea what you did tonight?" he demanded, his words spitting fire. "You think you can embarrass me in public like that?" Kaylee didn't flinch. She stood at the bar, calm and deliberate, the stem of a wine glass poised between her fingers. She poured a measured stream of red, the liquid catching the dim light of the suite's chandeliers, before finally meeting his glare. "Embarrass you?" Her voice was smooth, level, cutting with precision. "Austin, you embarrassed yourself." His jaw clenched, the vein at his temple throbbing. "I gave Serena something that was mine to give." "No," Kaylee corrected, taking a slow sip, her composure a blade sharper than any shout. "You gave her something that was mine to create." She set the glass down, her eyes locking onto his with unshakable authority. "That ring was from Eliora's private inventory. Do you understand what that means? It wasn't even on the market. It was secured in our vault, traced, catalogued, overseen by me personally." "Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own design?" Austin faltered, his anger colliding with the weight of her certainty. For a moment he tried to mask it with bravado, but the cracks showed in the way his hands curled into fists at his sides, in the way his gaze darted away from hers. He had spent years building fortunes, manipulating markets, buying influence, but here, in the quiet of their suite, stripped of his audience, he looked small. Kaylee stepped closer, her presence deliberate, every inch of her radiating the power he had tried to claim for himself. "You didn't just betray me," she said softly, though her words carried the weight of a verdict. "You stole from me. From my work. From my name." Austin opened his mouth, but nothing came. The excuses he might have summoned dissolved under the sharpness of her gaze. In that silence, the truth pressed down on him harder than her words could. He wasn't the conqueror he imagined himself to be. He was a boy, caught red-handed, standing in a house built on foundations he had never truly owned. Kaylee picked up her glass again, her voice steady as stone. "You've mistaken my grace for blindness, Austin. Don't ever confuse the two again." Serena sprawled across a velvet chaise in her high-rise apartment, the Atlanta skyline glittering behind her like her personal backdrop. Her phone was angled just so, the ring positioned perfectly to catch the soft glow of the city lights. Caption after caption dripped with the same sugary arrogance she wore like perfume. "When you deserve the best, it finds you." She puckered her lips, tapped upload, and watched as the likes and comments began to surge. For a brief moment she basked in it, the validation, the envy, the illusion that she had secured her place among the untouchable. But by midnight, the tone shifted. What had started as adoration began to curdle into something sharper, darker. Comments piled beneath her post, no longer compliments, but questions. Screenshots of the ring circulated on fashion blogs and jewelry forums, its origin dissected with clinical precision. It wasn't just any diamond. It was unmistakably an Eliora piece, one of the company's unreleased showcase designs, part of a collection that hadn't yet touched the market. Serena's triumph, meant to dazzle, had become evidence. By dawn, headlines blazed across gossip sites. "She's wearing the wife's ring." "Mistress outshined by CEO." Side-by-side photos appeared, Serena flashing her diamond like a trophy, and Kaylee Reed stepping into the gala in emerald silk, serene and commanding. The comparison was merciless. Serena looked like a child playing dress-up. Kaylee looked like the woman who owned the room, the brand, and the story. Serena scrolled furiously, her manicured nails tapping against the screen as she tried to delete the worst of the comments. but they multiplied faster than she could erase them. "Borrowed shine," one sneered. "She's flaunting what isn't hers." Another read, "The ring belongs to Kaylee. Everything else probably does too." The diamond that had seemed her crown only hours earlier now felt heavy, suffocating. Every photo she had posted with it gleamed like a confession she couldn't take back. Brands that once courted her influence grew silent. One boutique rescinded a collaboration quietly, their PR email polite but firm. "We believe our values no longer align." Serena's inbox filled, but not with offers, only with ridicule, thinly veiled under the mask of curiosity. "How does it feel to wear the wife's design?" someone messaged, their words accompanied by a laughing emoji. By noon, she yanked the ring off her finger and flung it onto the counter, the stone skittering across marble before coming to rest under the unforgiving light of morning. It no longer shimmered like triumph. It sat there, cold and accusing, a collar she could not remove even when she tried. Serena Vale had thought she'd won. Instead, the world had watched her fall. The boardroom was tense, though Kaylee moved through it with a composure that made the tension hers to command. The morning headlines still lingered in every corner of the room, the scandal impossible to ignore. Serena Vale's humiliation had gone viral, and with it came Eleora's name, whispered, dissected, analyzed. The men seated around the polished mahogany table had once doubted her, once whispered behind closed doors that a young black woman couldn't possibly helm a global jewelry empire. Now they sat straighter, their pens stilled, their gazes fixed on her as if waiting for direction from the very storm they feared. Kaylee placed a slim leather folder on the table and looked at each man in turn, her eyes steady, her expression unreadable. She did not need to raise her voice. Authority flowed from her like light through a diamond, refracted and undeniable. "This is not a setback," she began. "This is an opportunity." Her words dropped into the silence, anchoring the room. She spoke of the scandal not as a liability, but as leverage, reframing it with the precision of a jeweler setting a flawless stone. She unveiled the new campaign, her tone deliberate. "Dignity outshines wealth." On the screen behind her, the phrase glowed in silver script over an image of a woman's hand, not Serena's, not anyone's in particular, but every woman's, wearing the infamous ring. "This piece was never meant to be a trophy," Kaylee said, her voice smooth as silk and steel. "It was meant to symbolize strength. Worth that cannot be bought or diminished. Tonight, the world saw it misused. Tomorrow, they will see it reclaimed." The board shifted, murmurs rising, but not of dissent, of agreement, even admiration. They understood what she was doing. She was taking a betrayal that could have shaken the company and polishing it into brilliance. What Serena Vale had tried to flaunt as conquest would now become Eleora's crown jewel. Kaylee leaned forward, her hands folded neatly, her eyes gleaming with quiet fire. "We control the story, not the whispers. We remind the world that Eleora's diamonds are not for scandal. They are for women who know their worth." The vote was unanimous, not a single hand wavering. For a moment, Kaylee allowed herself a quiet breath, the weight of triumph sinking in. Austin's carelessness had threatened to stain her empire, but instead, it had become her weapon. Betrayal had been transformed into brilliance. As the meeting closed, the board filed out with newfound respect, no longer whispering doubts but marveling at the woman who had turned the ring into a reckoning. Kaylee remained at the head of the table, serene and unshaken, her empire gleaming brighter than ever. The penthouse was quiet when Austin returned that night, the city's neon glow spilling through the wide glass windows, but failing to soften the tension that hung in the air. He loosened his tie as if the gesture might ease the weight pressing on his chest. Kaylee sat in the armchair across the room, a book resting on the table beside her, though it was clear she hadn't touched it. A half-empty glass of wine gleamed under the lamplight. She didn't rise when he entered. She didn't need to. "Kaylee," he began, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. "I was wrong. I lost my head. I never meant to." She raised her hand, stopping him before the excuses could gather momentum. Her eyes, calm and steady, pinned him in place more firmly than any fury could have. "Austin, don't waste your breath on apologies you don't believe," she said softly, her words carrying the precision of a verdict. He tried again, shifting closer, his tone pleading. "I thought I could keep it separate. What happened with Serena? It was nothing compared to us. You know that her laugh was low, almost pitying, though no amusement reached her eyes. You really believe this is about Serena?" She stood then, her gown falling in elegant folds, her presence filling the room with unshakable authority. "I don't compete with mistresses, Austin. I don't compete with anyone." She stepped closer, her voice sharpening, every syllable deliberate. "I own the ground you walk on, and the company behind the ring you thought would buy her love." The words struck harder than any accusation. Austin's mouth opened, then closed again, the defense dying in his throat. For the first time, he looked at her and saw what the world already knew. His power had always been borrowed. The contracts, the connections, the access, so much of it had flowed from Eleora, from her, from Kaylee. He sank into the couch, his shoulders slumping, the bravado stripped away. His silence said more than words could. Kaylee studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned away, lifting her wine glass with the same composure she had carried through every battle of the past week. "You see, Austin," she murmured, her back to him now, "your mistake wasn't Serena. Your mistake was forgetting who you were married to." The finality in her voice settled like stone, and in the quiet that followed, Austin Reed finally understood. He hadn't just lost control of a scandal, he had lost the illusion of power itself. The city spread before her like a constellation made of steel and glass, every building lit with the restless glow of ambition. From her office on the top floor of Eleora's headquarters, Kaylee Reed watched the skyline with a stillness that felt almost regal. The hour was late, the corridors outside long empty, but the hum of the city below echoed the rhythm of her own thoughts. On her desk, beneath the soft gleam of a single lamp, lay the ring that had set everything in motion. Not the stolen piece flaunted at a gala, but its twin, crafted in the same suite, cut from the same vision. Its diamond flared under the light, casting shards across the polished wood like fragments of fire. Kaylee reached for it slowly, her fingers tracing the cool band as though greeting an old companion. She turned it between her hands, the facets catching her reflection in tiny, fractured glimpses. Then, without hesitation, she slipped it onto her finger. The fit was perfect, but its meaning was hers alone. It wasn't a symbol of marriage. It wasn't a trinket passed down from a man who mistook possession for love. It was her crown, her reminder that every piece she created carried her strength, her vision, her unshakable worth. The scandal that had threatened to humiliate her had instead clarified the truth, exposing where the power had always resided, not in Austin's reckless gestures, not in Serena's shallow flaunting, but in her. In the woman who had built Eleora with quiet brilliance, who had turned betrayal into brilliance, who had transformed whispers into applause. She leaned back in her chair, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and allowed herself a faint, private smile. She had not needed to raise her voice, nor seek revenge, nor prove anything to anyone. Her dignity had spoken louder than outrage ever could, and in the end, it was not the mistress who held the spotlight, nor the husband who controlled the narrative. It was Kaylee, serene, unbending, radiant. Her phone buzzed with another flood of messages, press requests, statements of support, congratulatory notes, but she ignored them all. The world could clamor as it wished. She owed it nothing more tonight. Instead, she lifted her hand, the diamond blazing against the skyline beyond the glass, and breathed in the quiet power of the moment. Kaylee Reed didn't just own the ring. She owned the story, the company, the legacy. And as the night deepened, she remained where she had always been, resolute, luminous, and utterly untouchable. If this story struck a chord with you, share it. Somewhere, a woman is being underestimated in a room she built, staying quiet while the world mistakes her silence for submission. She needs to remember that power doesn't always roar. It signs, it owns, it endures. Drop a comment if you've ever been counted out, and let them watch you count yourself back in. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.